What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the Kinda Funny Screencast, your home for all of the movie, TV, streaming service reviews, reactions, breakdowns you could possibly want here at Kinda Funny. Did Google just sign me out right as the show's starting, so I have to load up the document again? I'm your host for today, Barrett Courtney, and I want to let you know that you can catch Screencast at least once a week on youtube.com/kindafunny, roosterteeth.com, and on podcast services around the globe. Today, we are talking about the end of Better Call Saul, and to do that today, I am joined by everyone's favorite cabbie, Roger Picorni.
Whoa, I'm a cabbie now. I like that. I hate driving.
I just love how much we leaned into the cabbie in these last few episodes, and I love the shenanigans that they got up to. And in all of my notes, I kept forgetting the cabbie's name, which I believe is Jeff.
Yep.
And so I just wrote him down as Cabby. So Cabby's just been in my head a lot. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say, I've Googled Better Call Saul Cabby literally 4 times today because I kept on forgetting his name is Jeff.
And that lovely laugh that you hear is rounding out the group today. Everyone's favorite muscle for hire, Jake Baldino from youtube.com/Jake Baldino, and from the Friends Per Second podcast where they recently had Jeff Keighley on. How you doing today, Jake?
I am great. I am so ready to talk about this. It's been like my whole life, it feels like, and I'm 4 for 4, right? How many times have I been with you guys?
You've been here twice as much as when Andy Cortez has been here.
Nice.
Again,
than Andy, finally.
Yeah. Again, as you know from last episode, Greg wanted Andy to go on a drive, and we have not heard from him since. Unfortunately, no, he's on vacation. He's hanging out with family right now in Belize. And so unfortunately he won't be able to make it here today, but I'm sure he'll be like tweeting and talking about Better Call Saul and whatever content he comes back for, because as I know, his and mine friendship started because of Better Call Saul. Like, I had met him once or twice way back around the time that the show had started, and it was around the time I knew he was moving out to San Francisco that we were kind of texting a lot back and forth, and I think that was around the 2nd season of Better Call Saul, and we were constantly texting each other like theories and stuff. And then once he first moved out here to San Francisco, the thing that we would always hang out for, he would always come over to our house, because this was before we lived together, and he would come out and watch Better Call Saul every week with us, which was kind of, it's sad that he's not here today, because that's a staple of our friendship. But I'm excited to talk to him about it when he returns. Guys, we have a lot to talk about today. We have not talked about this show since the first episode of season 6 part 2, which was titled Point and Shoot, kind of going into the all of the crazy shenanigans with like immediately dealing with Howard being dead in Jimmy and Kim's apartment, Lalo and the face off with him and Gus Fring and all that stuff. That was the last time we got to talk and kind of break down our thoughts on all of this. So we have a lot to get through. So I just want to jump into the housekeeping. Even though we're all sad, Saul has ended. There is no time to mourn. There are so many shows to talk about on Screencast throughout the next few months. Later this week, we will be starting our weekly reviews of She-Hulk, Attorney at Law. This coming Monday, we will be getting our weekly reviews of House of Dragons, the Game of Thrones prequel, which is just kind of snuck up on me. I didn't realize that it was already coming out this weekend, which is insane. So again, make sure to subscribe to youtube.com/kindafunny and your podcast feeds to keep up with everything, because there's always so much to talk about in the entertainment world. And hey, if you want to support the show and the channel, you can be one of our Patreon supporters, where at the silver tier or above, you could watch this show ad-free and live as it's being recorded, like Samuel Jervis, Jake Stepp are currently right now, or you could even be one of our Patreon producers like Fargo Brady and Molecule over on patreon.com/kindafunny. We talked about this show being ad-free if you're a Patreon supporter, but speaking of ads, if you're not supporting us on Patreon, we're brought to you by Shopify and Uplift, but we'll tell you about that later. Let's talk about Better Call Saul Season 6 Part 2. Now, here's the thing. we have 5 episodes to talk about, and every episode I was like, I don't know how we're going to do this screencast because there's so much to talk about for each and every episode. So we're going to go all the way back to episode 9. We're going to start with Fun and Games, which was the first episode that we kind of took a break from, and we're going to work our way towards the finale. There will be time codes in the description below, so if you just want to jump to the finale talk, you can. That'll all be there for you. But if you want to go on the journey with us and all of the breakdowns of all of the episodes, stick around. But first, before we even get into the episodes and breakdowns, Jake, I want to start with you. Overall, Better Call Saul season 6, the final season. How do you feel? After the show has ended, what are your feelings walking away from the show after, I think, 7 years, 7 years, I think?
I feel really satisfied. I think I definitely have been for a while on the train where I think it's better than Breaking Bad, and it's one of my favorite shows of all time. And it's solidified with the ending. I always feel like a show doesn't have to have the most amazing, bombastic ending to solidify it as a great show. I think Better Call Saul had that going for it already, but I thought they stuck the landing too. Just great top to bottom.
Roger, how are you feeling after the finale in season 6 as a whole?
Yeah, I feel very similar to Jake. I never expected this finale. We'll talk about it later, but I never expected it to be Felina. I never expected it to be this massive blowout ending. I knew it was going to be slower. I knew it was going to be more in line with what Better Call Saul is, and it hit all the right notes for me this entire season. I think that build-up was really great. I think there are some loose threads that, for me at least, that I the more I think about it, the more I'm kind of a little bit sad that we didn't get some closure on it. We'll talk about that later, but as a whole, I was very satisfied with it, and watching it with my brother was an incredible experience because him and I haven't watched any of Better Call Saul together. So we watched the finale together. We wrote down like little note cards of like what we thought was going to happen, and it was great. It was a great experience.
That's awesome.
I'm really happy with the
I love the family like kind of camaraderie of watching the show together. I was having drinks with a buddy over the weekend who my best friend from high school, where we watched the finale of Breaking Bad together, and we were reminiscing of like, Jesus Christ, that was 9 years ago, and now this show is like about to end in a couple of days. It was really insane, and yeah, I kind of echo what you guys are saying. Like I tweeted out last night of, in the hands of lesser creators, I think this show at the end of the day would have just been a nice, fun reminder of how great Breaking Bad was. But the fact that, the Gilligan Gould team have kind of learned throughout the years and like crafted their practice of storytelling through, actual, character studies, visual storytelling in a lot of the cinematography and stuff like that. Like they've gone better and better every season from the beginning of Breaking Bad season 1 up until the final season of this show, Better Call Saul. And I just so impressed how Saul was able to leave Breaking Bad's shadow. Like, yes, there are ties to the original show and all that, but it really kind of is impressive, like how it was able to stand on its own. And I think even that in and of itself was a feat, but to also make it another fantastic show on the same level of Breaking Bad, of a character study of a man who is kind of too obsessed with like gambling in a way and coming out on top and being so overtaken by pride to a certain extent and not have it feel too similar to Breaking Bad. I was really blown away by it, and I love it. And we'll kind of maybe have a definitive answer by the end of this episode of, is Better Call Saul better than Breaking Bad? I know Jake already kind of alluded to that a little bit. You're going for it. But maybe we'll ask the question again once we get through it. So let's go back to not the beginning, but the second episode of season 6, part 2, Fun and Games. I did not write down who directed this episode, unfortunately. But this is the
Michael Morris.
Okay. That is the director, and this is the aftermath of, Howard dying, Lalo being killed, and all of this stuff. And, this is, I think the show kind of, is this where, like, this is, like, where Mike sits them down and, like, tells them, like, you guys are going to be, like, great actors, you're going to, like, sell this stuff, and I think this is, like, This is right after that conversation, because I think the episode before this is where that conversation happens. It's very like similar to when he first meets Jesse Pinkman, and you see them like putting Howard in the fridge. They're literally like fridging him and all this stuff. And I'm looking through my notes here just because there's so much that's going on here. But I think that this is the one where we get one of my favorite moments is, I think, the painting. I want to talk about the painting that's shown in this episode, because I think this is where they go. They're at the hotel, like they don't want to stay at like their apartment while Mike and his crew are, cleaning everything up and making everything look perfect. I love that, seeing that process as well of Mike and his crew like cleaning up the body and like taking pictures and making sure everything like looks tip top. And you get this this picture of the shot. I think they're on the they're in their hotel, and Kim is laying on the bed, and Jimmy's kind of sitting at the end of it, and there's a painting right above. Or is this? I'm sorry, is this the last episode? I forget. There's so much to talk about here.
Yeah.
But anyways, like I still want to shout it out of like the painting above the bed, and you see this you get this feeling where Jimmy's trying to convince her of like, hey, like we're gonna move on, everything's gonna be okay. Like one day we're gonna wake up and like we're gonna realize that we've forgotten all about it. And you get this shot of this painting, and it's the same painting from Breaking Bad, if you remember. It's this family looking out at this man who's rowing either away from them into the ocean or back to them. And we get that painting twice in Breaking Bad. Once when Walter fakes the fugue state, and he's staying in the hospital, and where he has to like sneak into his own house, like make sure he hides the money correctly, and then sneaks back into the hospital, and he kind of looks at that painting, and I feel like that was like the moment where he's like officially too far gone. He's no longer on this journey with his family. Like that was the moment for him where like he's no longer a part of that family. He is on his own route. And then the second time we see it in Breaking Bad is when when they're planning the 2 minutes, where they're trying to plan the killing 9 guys in 3 different prisons, all within 2 minutes. And he sees it in a motel where he's planning with the Meth Damon and his crew of like how to pull this off. And in that moment, I think Walt sees that, and it's supposed to kind of signify of like maybe he's coming back to his family. His journey is over. And I love that they bring that back in this episode. And to me, that was the moment where I knew, I was like, Kim is off the journey here. She can't deal with this anymore. And this is the one where we get the breakup. And like again, Rhea Shehorn's like fantastic performance of kind of walking Jimmy through of like why she didn't want to do certain things, because she knew that they would break up if she told him about like Lalo still being alive, and like all of this chain reaction. How did you guys feel about like the kind of breakup, and what felt like at the moment at the end of this episode, kind of the ending of Better Call Saul in a way, where she walks away from him and just kind of fades,
Yeah, I mean, this episode in a lot of ways is the end for a lot of characters. This is the last time we see Gus. This is the last time we see Micah, and it's their goodbye of that part of the storyline. And then when we actually see that relationship with Jimmy and Kim implode, and I knew it was coming. You feel it's coming. You know it's coming, but it still hurts, and it's heartbreaking. And there's nothing more heartbreaking than that, doubled with the time jump. Like that time jump is probably is so masterful. It's the best way they could have done that. And like, that's the thing that I really appreciated about that scene. And now looking back at it, right, you see Kim start to go into the place that she ends up later on in the season, right? Like where she is like almost a shell of herself. She becomes comatose. Like she is just completely secluded inwards, going through this, like not wanting to talk to Jimmy, not wanting to scheme about anything else, ways to fix this. Like she's done. She is going to put herself in her own mental prison. And seeing Jimmy become Saul, and that massive gut punch, right? Like there's that great meme where it's like in the beginning of season 1, it's like, oh man, I'm excited to see Saul, and then you finally see him, you're like, oh fuck, it's Saul. God damn it. Like it's heartbreaking. It's so sad to see Saul Goodman, and like I think that we all talked about it in the beginning of the series, like when, like, how are they gonna like connect these two dots, right? Like this massive character in Breaking Bad who's such a dick. He's not Jimmy. He's not Jimmy at all. Is when Saul goes home, is he Jimmy? Like, that was the big question. But to show the way that they really made it like a clean, like, he is just a different person after this is probably the best answer to that question, and it is the one that I didn't expect that they would do. I thought that they would kind of make it something where he at home he is just kind of a shell of himself, like maybe he takes off the persona a little bit, but the fact that he's always Saul is the best answer.
Yeah,
and
because he's so far gone at that
exactly.
point. And I love that too, because Kim recognizes that in her speech. I have it written down: the lengths we will go to be happy while ignoring what it does to others. You know, like her mindset of why she didn't tell Jimmy about Lalo embodies that. Like their relationship, how far gone he's become to become Saul Goodman, and like how her leaving him in that moment kind of like puts that final nail where, you know, he has nothing left in his life at that point to kind of balance him and bring him back a little bit. And so yeah, it is heartbreaking when you get the time jump and he wakes up in his super luxurious home, and you know, he goes into the office, and you know, the final shot of that episode, I think it's I think he says like, let justice be done though the heavens fall. That, and it's like in this big illustrious office that we know and love from the from Breaking Bad, but it feels so empty. There's something about the cinematography there where you feel his life, even though he's this big bombastic semi-successful local lawyer, like he's got kind of nothing right now. Jake, how did you feel about kind of the transition from the end of Kim leaving him to the end of the episode?
It's like the boldest time jump I think they've done in the whole series, really, because it isn't doing what we talked about so much. It's not like he at one point goes, "That's it, I'm going to become Saul Goodman." There's none of that. The entire show laid the groundwork for it, and then it jumps, and you go, "Okay, I know what happened. I know how he got to that point." With this, and with the shattering of that relationship, really selling it. That's the last piece of that puzzle that you needed, and it worked because the characters were built up for so long. It's like you knew they were going to break up, possibly, but not how. And the way they did it, and the way, you know, the way Kim justifies it, just makes it like one of the most real things ever. I think I'll get to that in a bit, but I just think it's like the realness of their back and forths, their ups and downs in their relationship that really hit the nail on the coffin. And then the time jump, it's like a double gut punch.
Yeah. Some other highlights I want to shout out for this episode. I think this is where we also get the episode with Howard's wife, that they're mourning Howard, and I felt that was like one of the victims, one of the many victims you see throughout both of these shows, right? Where you're just like, Jesus Christ, like, what did these selfish people do to these like just kind of innocent bystanders, where she feels like she's going crazy, and she knows that like they had something to do with it, but you know, then they kind of gaslight her in a way where it's like, no, like we didn't do anything. And like kind of Kim, you see Kim double down on it in that conversation, but you know that she feels terrible for doing that. And you know, we get that a little bit of that payoff later, which like I was questioning. I was like, man, is this like where we're gonna leave Howard's wife? That's so depressing. And I love that we get a follow-up to that later. We also get the Gus being called to Don Eladio's, and this kind of final like end cap to the drug cartel side of this universe, where you know they sit Gus down, and the Salamancas are there, and they're like, this fucker like did everything, he killed Lalo, and Don Eladio, how quickly he trusts and buys Gus's story, because you know he thinks that the Salamancas are kind of crazy. Like I forget who's the is it Hector Salamanca who's the one in the wheelchair, right?
Yeah.
And he's like, he like they put him to bed or whatever, and he's like, yeah, dude, he's a crazy old man. And like they set it up perfectly to be like, all right, like this again, like you don't need to see anything really in between this moment and when we first see Gus in Breaking Bad, because like you kind of fill in the gaps there, because that's everything that was set up that we need to, similar to Saul and who he becomes, of like Kim leaving him was the final end cap. Don Eladio kind of putting his trust into Gus is the end cap that all we really needed to see. We didn't really need to see anything more. Roger, you had your hand up.
Just really quick, like I the thing that stood out to me that was right before he walks in there, like you see Gus nervous, like you see Gus like scared. And like,
even though he got rid of Lalo, like, did he actually pull this off? You know?
Yeah, and even though again we know he doesn't die there, like there is that moment where you're like, are they gonna change the timeline? But no, like for me, like you feel that fear in him during that moment, and that is a great setup and adds a lot more context. Even though we already had a lot in Breaking Bad to their relationship and just that final like fuck you from Don Eladio being like, you know who you work for, like you are under me. It really kind of sells the rest of Breaking Bad, which is great.
Yeah, I love the quote. A little hate is okay as long as you remember who's boss. And it's like it perfectly like just encapsulates like their relationship. I think the scene ends with him looking down at the pool again where his partner was killed by the Salamancas years and years ago, and just like as a reminder, like kind of what Gus's long-term plan is going into Breaking Bad, right? And it's so good. We get kind of Mike getting closure with, or not closure, but him trying to have closure with Nacho's dad, and kind of telling him of like, hey, like your son was, he had a good head on his shoulders, but like he was kind of in with the wrong crowd, and it just didn't work out from him. And but it's over. Like nobody's gonna come after you. And his dad retorts like, it never ends. You gangsters and your justice, you're all the same.
The way his dad responds is perfect, because it's almost like Mike's not dumb, but I don't think Mike expected that response where he just goes that.
That definitely,
it nice.
That carried through to him for years to come, probably up until his last moments as well, of thinking about the drama between Walter and Gus and kind of how cyclical it feels eventually to him. So
can we back up and touch on one more last appearance of the real last appearance of Gus?
Yes.
At the restaurant.
Yes.
Having a nice chat with the sommelier, who he may or may not be interested in.
Yeah.
He's just really into this person. They're into each other. He's enjoying this glass of wine. It's so good because it does the thing that we get a little bit with Gus, where he's a stone character, and then every once in a while you see a new side of him. We've seen him afraid now, and then this is the time where the last time we get to see him, he has a moment of peace and a moment of happiness,
and he's like,
but it makes him such a cooler bad guy, because it makes him so cooler because he catches himself and he's like, no, like you see his face go, oh wait, I'm enjoying myself. No, like it's so cool.
Like his the sommelier gives him like a bottle that was opened by someone else, and he tells him like his loss is your gain, which echoes like what he just did with the Salamancas, which was great. And I have it written down here of like, Gus tastes a little bit of the life he can't have. How does he let someone in on the life he's already made for himself? And it's really depressing to see like how he he's really happy. He loves this moment that he's in. He has to remind himself of like, no, and you see him lock away those feelings and turn back into the stone cold Gus that we know, and it's honestly really, really depressing. There was one more thing that I wanted to call out, or maybe that was it. I think that might have been the highlights for this episode. But I had to go back, because when we get to the kind of time jump, right, where we get Saul somewhere around the Breaking Bad timeline, right? I had to go back to the first episode with Saul, Better Call Saul, in Breaking Bad, and I was like, is this the same outfit? Because when he's talking to Francesca on the earpiece, he's talking about a public masturbator, and I was like, oh my god, he's about to meet Badger. And so I had to look to see if it was the same exact outfit, but it wasn't. So I was like, okay, but it's close. Like, he's about to get to that stuff, and I love the subtle things, if like that fans can pick up on, to like know exactly kind of where it's happening in the timeline. And the last thing, he now has his world's greatest lawyer mug, no longer the one from Kim that was shot because she had written down second greatest lawyer on his, and it's because she is no longer a lawyer, which I love that little detail. But moving on to maybe the most controversial episode I think I've seen, episode 10, Nippy, directed by one Michelle McLaren, who's directed a few episodes, I think, of Better Call Saul, definitely of Breaking Bad. How'd you guys feel about, now we're back, now we're fully in the Gene timeline, the kind of main story of Better Call Saul's done. I kind of equated these last 4 episodes to almost the epilogue of the series a little bit. How do we feel about this and this whole thing with Miriam and I think Jeff the cabbie, if I'm right in remembering his name? I can never remember the cabbie's name for the life of me. But how'd y'all feel about this episode, which apparently was very controversial?
Not for me. I think it was very, like, if you've been watching the show, it's like we got another one of these types of episodes. Yeah. And I feel like we needed one more to let things breathe and kind of catch us back up to speed. But it's not out of character for this show, right? How many episodes have we seen where it's this long plotting thing of Mike doing a thing, or, Saul setting up this weird elaborate scam, and you don't even know where it's going for another episode after that, and it's so tedious. But it's just more good build. And here, it kind of distills it down to its base level because it's Slippin' Jimmy being Slippin' Jimmy. It's just him in his older years. So it's like a good full circle thing. And you see him once again becoming the monster, and you're like, oh boy, is this the last time you're gonna be the monster? What's going on here?
Yeah, I was I was watching it and I was like, I know people are gonna trash on this one. I just knew it because we go from the last episode, which is that bombastic, like we let all the feelings out, and then we have the time skip. We're like, hell yeah, so excited to see Saul, and then we get none of it, right? So I understood that why this was controversial. I did not see it that way either. I think this was a great way to see. There was a great way to kind of play with our expectations, right? Because we saw with Jeff, and first of all they recasted him, which is I don't love the recast because the other guy looked a lot more menacing, but I understand why. I know they did it because scheduling, right?
Yeah, they had a problem with just so our viewers know, because I remember there being some confusion of like, who's this guy and stuff like that. Like, this is the cabbie that recognizes him a season or 2 ago in the Gene timeline. It was just like an unfortunate timing for the actor that they had to recast it. But I kind of liked the recast because he's like, I was a little bit more sold on like just like the skeeviness, like look to him and stuff like
dope.
that.
He's like really unfortunate, just like
I that as well, where it, like you can see a little bit of the both sides of him trying to take advantage of Jimmy, but then also on the flip side when Jimmy starts to take advantage of him, and you definitely see like, oh, like he's a little bit of a victim in a way, but maybe he made his own bed in that sense. But yeah, I loved this too because it brought us back to where Jimmy was, like almost near the beginning of the show, right? Where he's pulling off schemes with skateboarders to like get hit by a car and stuff. Like this was, him being Slipping Jimmy again, which was the doorway to him being addicted to being Saul again. And he was relapsing essentially this episode, which I absolutely loved. And how many different angles he's playing at, right? With the fake dog named Nippy, getting the in with the cabbie's mom, Miriam, becoming friends with her, her eventually telling him like, you're a good influence, Gene, which I just absolutely loved. And then we get this whole scheme of them, he tells them of like, you get one job with me and that's it. Like we're gonna do a big score that you guys can make a lot of money off of, and then that's it. You want to like live this nice luxurious life. We're doing this one thing, and they set up this whole robbing the department store in the mall. And I loved where they're out in the middle of like the field after like Jimmy had like kind of taken accurate measurements of like the layouts of the floors and had him like running around in the snow and like memorizing like the 3 genes for me and stuff like that. It was so great.
Yeah.
But my favorite part is him playing the security guards. And that whole montage of becoming friends with Jerry from Parks and Rec and like bringing them Cinnabon, like whatever it is, like every night, every other night. And I loved the sequence of like, at first, like they recognized of like, oh, you're the guy who called out like to have that kid get a lawyer. Like, you're a fucking asshole. And I love slowly throughout the montage, like how like even the security guard who called him out, like also becomes friends with him, and like him studying like college sports to like
That's so good.
Get
That's
more
so
of the
real.
lingo.
I've done that in every one of my jobs where I'm like, oh man, they got first down. I can't believe they got first down. And I'm like, I have no idea what I'm even talking about.
Yeah, and I love too in the first time he does it, where he's being so vague and he's pulling it off just well enough.
Yeah.
And but then going through the process of actually like reading papers, it's so good. And then I love the setup, right? Because this is what this team does so well. Of like, all right, the plan. Here's one thing that they have not accounted for, and the department store, they're like, oh, this thing needs to be waxed. Oh, like get the guy to wax it. And you see the guy who's waxing like throughout the entire episode, like it's part of his process almost, where he like passes him by on his way to security. And the entire time you're on edge, because you're like, oh my god, the cabbie who got secretly loaded into their docking bay is coming out. And I love that whole phone call with Jimmy and the manager at the department store.
So good.
And I like the entire time you're like, oh my god, the waxing guy's gonna like see him, they're gonna get caught, this is how Jimmy gets caught, all of this stuff. And then they pull one over on you, even though they set it up like very well, where like something's gonna go wrong, and you think it's gonna be they get caught, but no, it's the floor's already waxed and he fucking slips and hits his head so hard. It's
like a Daffy Duck slip. It's perfect.
It's so good. And the way he like tries to awkwardly distract Jerry from Parks and Rec and like being like, I'm so sad and alone and stuff like that. And
we do get a mention. I mean, I know it's for he's doing it as a ruse, but he does mention his brother, and like that was a little bit of like, oh, okay, there's maybe a little bit of something here, maybe a little bit of humanity, in him. But he was of course just for a ruse. But man, he hit that floor so fucking hard. Oh my god, I thought that guy was dead.
I thought he was dead too. I was like, oh, he's not waking up.
I thought we're just gonna see the blood just start pooling. I was like, oh no, but he got up and they did the thing. I really enjoyed it because like I understand why people would not like this episode, but it works really well just to see where Gene is at in his life, like how he isn't fully, he's still embracing who he is. And I do love that ending because it kind of is it's a switcheroo, right? Like he goes through all the clothes and he like sees the Saul-esque shirt and he puts it back. And like that for me, like I was like convinced. I was like, oh, maybe he's actually gonna go on the straight and narrow. Nope, not at all. But like
no.
it was really interesting. Like to see, I enjoyed this episode a lot, and I also love that when Jeff comes out of the bathroom and he realizes he got away with it, and like that you see that spark in his eye, like of like, oh my god, like this is incredible. Like you see that like that itch of the addiction starting in him, and it's that cycle all over again. It's great.
And they build it up so well, but then they flip it on you later. Where at the end of this episode, I was convinced. I was like, where he tells Jeff and the friend of like, we're done. Say it out loud. And the way the cabbie responds, he's like, yeah, we're done. And I was convinced in the next episode they were going to be too addicted and they were going to force Gene back into another scenario. But, in retrospect of like, he got a little bit of the taste of slipping Jimmy. And, I love where he goes back to the Cinnabon and he's like, you see the machine like rolling the dough and stuff. And, life's back to normal. But is that enough? Or, is the addiction hitting a little bit too hard for him to accept that, right? And yeah, I thought it was interesting because Andy and I were kind of debating on, is this over for Gene, putting like the symbolizing of him putting the shirt back, and I was convinced that he was done and that the cabbie was going to try to pull him in, but Andy wasn't so sure. He was convinced everything was done, and it was all going to be good for Gene, I think. And so then we get into the episode in Better Call Saul titled Breaking Bad, directed by Thomas Schnauz. How'd y'all feel about this? This is the one everybody had been waiting for the first appearance of our boys, Walt and Jesse. The show even opens with them recreating the scene where they have him in front of the grave that they dug for him. How'd y'all feel about it?
Hey, can I take this?
Yeah, not bad. It's so much of a like dangerously treading into like fan service territory,
Yeah.
but I think they did a good job. I actually think it's not necessarily the scene in the trailer, the mobile home specifically. It's really everything else around it that I think really nails it all. But it was nice to see them. Aaron Paul looks great. I was like, did they like deep fake him a little bit? Because he looks really good. Bryan Cranston obviously also looks good. They got hats on. They
so he
did
doesn't
a very
have to do
clever
the
thing to
bald
hide
cap.
their hair. Yeah. And it just felt right. It felt like they were slipping right back into it, and you were like, oh yeah, Breaking Bad. I remember this.
And yeah, I agree with you. Of like, it was one of those things we knew that they were coming, and this episode being titled Breaking Bad is like, all right, like how are they gonna do this and do it tastefully and not be it so fan surfacey? And again, looking back at this episode, I think in the context of where the finale goes, especially, I think it was kind of important to be reminded of this episode, Saul's first episode in Breaking Bad, and how they met. And I love, like, throughout, right? We kind of get something that I think Jimmy had felt, or Gene had felt in the post of everything that happened in Breaking Bad, where he even says in the episode beforehand of like, what's crazy? Like a high school teacher has cancer coming to me who can't pay his medical bills, and then a year later is like money like the size of a Volkswagen. That's crazy. And how he felt like he helped kind of build up Heisenberg, and we even get the scene with Mike, I think, later on in this episode, where he gives him the information. We're slowly getting these flashbacks throughout the episode of kind of Saul's perspective of his first episode in Breaking Bad. And I love that Mike's the one who tells him, like, don't pursue it any further. Like, he's a time bomb, essentially, like calling him a time bomb without actually saying it, as he does in Breaking Bad to Walt's face. But he's essentially telling him, like, they're bad news, like they're going to be caught or dead in a month, like just don't do it. And and again, the way this entire show, Jimmy's story, has been built up, that he's too addicted to kind of gambling and coming out on top and getting everything that he possibly can, even if it's a slim chance of him getting everything he wants to try to go for it, right? And I love that the ending of the episode, I think, or one of the final scenes, is him approaching the high school, and you see Walter's car. It's and again, I think on a surface level you could call it a little fan servicey, but again, I think it helps reinforce just like who Jimmy is, reinforcing this addiction that he's had, and kind of like how that led to the events of Breaking Bad, and almost a reminder of like, yeah, if Jimmy didn't help them out, like the rest of the show would not have happened the way that it did, which I find fascinating.
There was really like a little bit of a sinister aspect to that scene too, because of Mike being like, no, don't, and him knowing all the information and still seeking it out.
Yeah.
Where it's very much like another mark for slipping Jimmy. It's just like, let's another person who's got like a weird thing going on. How can we take advantage? So it's just like business as usual for him. And it feels like, he's being again. But then knowing that it creates Breaking Bad and makes everything even worse is like just like the pinnacle.
And I think it also adds on to it, and I think this is why you need an episode like Nippy before it, is that the Gene aspect of the show, of that episode, where he ends up going back and being like, you know what, actually, we're doing this, we're actually making a bigger scheme, we're going to steal people's identities, we're going to, and at the ending, him ending up being like, okay, I don't care if this guy has cancer, like, I'm going to break into his house and I'm going to do this. And like, and having it kind of mirror the fact that, like, someone brought this up, and I thought this was really interesting. Like in the beginning, in that episode of Better Call Saul, when he goes into Walt's high school, like Saul looks like he has all the power, but in reality, he's not. He's powerless. He's powerless to his addiction, and showing that with Gene is really interesting. Showing that he can't help himself. Literally, he cannot help himself. He sees it in front of him. He is going to take it, and that for me makes Nippy completely worth it. Just
with the build up and how it kind of expands here, 100%.
Then if you want like to go into like them doing the scam again and starting to build up where they're getting dudes drunk, and then like it's very con artist stuff, and essentially they're breaking into these guys' homes who they got drunk and then drugged, and they're doing identity theft, identity frauding type stuff. But what it really shows you, it's like another escalation from Nippy to this, where it's like, oh man, what a con man, what a fast talking scammer.
Yeah.
But then what this episode really sets up is like him like down and dirty, where it really strengthens the last episode, where it's like you're just a criminal, you're just a regular old dirty rotten criminal.
Yeah, and
it's
sorry,
gross,
go ahead.
honestly. Yeah, no, I just that whole Gene part of it just made me feel kind of sick, like because it really does bring you back down to earth, where it is slipping Jimmy, but it's like, oh no, he just is just this complete and utter criminal. You're right.
Yeah, and I love that where he has possibly a little bit of humanity there, where he even asked like the cancer patient, where he's like, should you really be drinking? And he responds, you only go around once. And I think that like in that moment, it almost reinforced him of like reinforcing his mind of like, yeah, you know what? You only go around once. So yeah, I'm going to screw you over. Like I'm going to make the best of my situation by like fucking you over. And I love that even it's too much for the cabbie's friend, where he's like, dude, like I saw the pills. Those were the same ones that like my dad or uncle took. I forget. And he's like, I can't do that. And, you know, I love that his response is like, you know, just because everybody's got a sob story, like you don't think he's like a douchebag and all of this stuff. And again, you just kind of see
watching out the window.
Yeah, and you just see how far he's gone and like how quickly he slipped back into being Jimmy and Saul after kind of being this dead inside Gene kind of person, right? But the show also opens after the cold open with you know, him getting interrupted by saying it wasn't me, it was Ignacio, and then it cuts to black. We get an update on Francesca and what she's been up to after Breaking Bad, which I loved. It seemed like she was like a cleaning lady or something for like the specific like apartment complex. Yeah, like and you know, these two stoners where she's like, hey, like don't throw stems and seeds down here, you dipshits, and they're like
watching Jackie Chan Adventures.
Yeah.
One more thing.
It was so good. And them just being dipshits, and she's like looking at the time, she's like, all right, I gotta go, like you dipshits deal with this. And I loved this because I don't know why she still deals with his bullshit, but she does, where she goes out to this payphone, makes sure she's not being followed, and kind of just gives him updates about things. Yeah. This definitely kind of harkened back a little bit to the penultimate episode of Breaking Bad, where Walt is in the middle of the winter hellscape or whatever it is in that little house, and every time the vacuum cleaner guy comes, he's just like wanting updates and just like figuring out like what's going on in life, and I love that we get so many updates on little things, right? Like they're really looking for him, Jimmy, because he's kind of the only one left, which is insane to think about. But when you think about it, you're like, oh yeah, like you know, Walt's dead. They found Jesse Pinkman's car near the Mexico border, which I love was a subtle follow up to El Camino, where you know, she assumes like, yeah, like the Pinkman's either dead or, you know, caught or something, but he's gone. And I love that little, like, that was Badger who actually left Pinkman's car down near Mexico, because I think that's what they do near the very beginning of El Camino, where he's like, yeah, Badger, take my car down there. They're going to look for me down there. And then, you know, I loved that subtle thing where it's like, all right, he really made it out. Jesse really made it out, and I don't need anything like further other than that, right? We get Kobe. They don't know where he is. We finally get the answer. One of the most important threads left hanging from Breaking Bad. Did Huel ever leave the fucking room? And he did, and he got to go back home. They like had him, what was it, like they held him under duress or something like that, so they couldn't charge him, which I love.
That's when I started crying. That was my big MCU character moment where, like, they referenced it.
Oh man. And sorry, go ahead, Reg.
No, I was just gonna say, the thing about that call that was really interesting. That was, I believe, that was the call that he tells her to do in November when in the last episode he sees her in Breaking Bad. He's like, hey, meet me at a payphone at 3:30 in November at this date. You got to remember. So that means that this all you forget, right? I just forget that this all happened within a year, right? Like he's only been Gene for like maybe 9, 10, 11 months. Like he has not been doing this for too long. And that for me like put it really into perspective, because I guess that it's always been apparent there, but like I guess I didn't remember that. And like to remember that like he's only been doing this for so long and he's slipped right back into it so fast.
Yeah, and I forget if in this call they like it's weird too, right? Because after you have to remember, like after everything went down, like Walt has also been gone for a very long time in the last like 2 episodes of Breaking Bad. So it's like, all right, has Walt already come back? Has that already happened? Like, I'm going to assume yes, because like I feel like we would have gotten an update on Saul coming back to Albuquerque if Walt had already come back and stuff like that. So I imagine this isn't too long after all of that goes down as well, because Francesca also mentions Skyler taking a deal, and then also, there was one thing. Oh, and Bill, the kind of lawyer that we've kind of known for, Bill Oakley, who we've known since season 1, kind of the dopey guy who is kind of a rival but kind of buddies with Jimmy. And Francesca's like, oh, he switched teams, and she was like, oh, he's gay. And he's like, no, dipshit, he's a defense attorney now. And I knew immediately when they set that up, I was like, oh, whenever he gets caught, because he's gonna get caught, he's gonna ask Bill to be his attorney, which again, love that subtle setup and payoff there. And we get a follow up on like Kim called Francesca after everything went down to just kind of check in on her, and we get a phone call between Gene and Kim, and you don't get to hear it at all. And I was convinced in this moment that like we were never going to hear this conversation. Maybe we'll hear it at like the end of the last episode.
Yeah.
That was
what I thought. I was terrified. I'm like, was that it?
Yeah.
Is that it?
Is that all we get of Kim? And
it was cool though to have for a little while just that like off-screen Kim, that unknown future Kim.
Yeah. And I thought, and in that moment, I was like, maybe that's all we need, He is so far gone. He's like, even though he's in hiding, he's no longer Saul Goodman. He's also slipping back into his old ways, and she has no more words for him. And you see him just fucking slam down the phone, kick the glass, and it's heartbreaking, man. And then, after that, we get what we were talking about before with, setting up all these fraud schemes, and Jimmy kind of doubling down of like, I'm gonna go to the cancer patient's house and I'm gonna do this, and that's all we get in that episode. I believe, I think that's where this episode leaves off. So we have 2 more episodes to talk about, but before we do that, let me tell you about our sponsors.
This episode is brought to you by Shopify, who powers all of the merch on KindaFunny.com/store. Shopify is the all-in-one commerce platform to start, run, and grow your business. Shopify gives entrepreneurs the resources once reserved for big business, so upstarts, startups, and established businesses alike can sell everywhere. Shopify powers millions of businesses from first sale to full scale, including KindaFunny and Rooster Teeth. Shopify has thousands of integrations and third-party apps, from on-demand printing to accounting to advanced chatbots and beyond. I love how Shopify has the tools and resources that make it easy for any business to succeed, from down the street to around the globe. Go to shopify.com/KFgames, that's all lowercase, for a free 14-day trial and get full access to Shopify's entire suite of features. Again, that is shopify.com/KFgames. Grow your business with Shopify today. Go to shopify.com/KFgames right now. Shopify.com/KFgames. Now, Andy, take it away.
Shout out to Uplift for sponsoring this episode. I've been using my Uplift desk for well over a year now. I love the thing so much I decided to write a rap song for them. The bill build quality is real good. It's made of real high quality wood. They didn't ask for it, I just did it anyway. Getting my uplift desk immediately improved my mood. Whenever I'm on shows, I'm standing up, I'm feeling a lot more energetic. And also I kind of feel like I was just maybe creating some bad habits sitting down at a desk all day. I would move my legs up, I'd sit underneath my legs on my chair, and eventually all that stuff just created really bad back pain for me. Choose from laminate, whiteboard, bamboo, solid wood, butcher block, or even custom solid wood or laminate options. Uplift Desk won New York Times Wirecutter's Best Standing Desk from 2019 to 2022. And while I'm at it, I'm just gonna give them an award as well. Best standing desk that I use in my bedroom from when they sent it to me until now. Uplift Desk have a 15-year warranty. They ship the same day you order with free shipping and free return shipping. So if you've been feeling the effects of sitting at a desk for 8 hours a day, maybe you want some more energy in your life, maybe you want to do squats in the middle of a Zoom call or something, uplift your life. Go to kindafunny.com/uplift.
All right, we're at the penultimate episode, Waterworks, where we start off with, I think that we get another kind of like Saul around the timeline of Breaking Bad, maybe a little bit beforehand, and it's Saul and Kim signing their divorce papers. And you have to imagine this was the last time that they saw each other, and it breaks my heart when, you know, it's just, it made me cringe a little bit to like have her come in, see all this fully Better Call Saul set up in his office, and he's like, pretty cool office, huh? And that was rough for me. How do you guys feel about that?
He's cold. He's like a completely different person, where it's just like a complete like disconnect.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I have it written down here. I think it's you know, he's been holding off like meetings apparently, and where Francesca's like, I'm leaving at 8. Like, you've got like so many people after like her, like stop putting it off, and like you can see like before he lets her in, he's struggling, because he knows that if anybody's able to like bring out any sort of humanity in him, it's her. And the way he just kind of brings that wall up when she comes in, it's really heartbreaking. And then we don't cut over to the I think the follow up of the cancer patient and being broken into there. We get a follow up on one Kim Wexler and what she's been up to in the post, like Better Call Saul, Breaking Bad world, where she's living in Florida, living her plain ass life, you know, having just being kind of a, not even a wife, because she's, I think, just dating the dude, but a very just kind of plain suburban life where she's working at this like what was it? It was like
Sprinklers?
parts. Yeah,
Sprinkler
like
manufacturer.
Sprinkler manufacturer. I also wrote down in my notes, the party is over. They're having very plain ass sex with the dude just going, "Yep."
Oh, it was so good.
Yep. So uncomfortable, and you just can tell that even in that moment where, you know, where there should be a little more passion, there's almost no passion, almost, where you're just getting the slow pan, and it's just yep over and over again. I don't think
It's like they're going to Olive Garden. He's watching TV, but not watching TV with her.
Right.
The
She's like
that
doing
she's
a
putting
puzzle
together was like a blank puzzle. Like
yeah.
it looked like it was just like white. And
Yeah.
I was like, oh God.
Like
Yeah,
she's got nothing going on, and then we get an immediate follow up, which I wasn't expecting. Like her side of the conversation on the phone. Like how, like, what were you guys feeling in the middle of this conversation? Of like, it's been 6 years, I think, that they mentioned since they've last talked. Like, this was insane.
Yeah.
It was them. It was really the turn yourself in. And it was like, oh, this is where it's going. Oh, no.
And, you know, he tries to, like, pull it out on her. Where it's like, if you feel so guilty, why don't you do it? And where he's, like, he doesn't feel like he needs to do it if she's not going to do it. She's also, in a way, like, hiding in a certain way. Like, being away, living in Florida with her, you know, dyed hair and her, you know, very, like, plain looking haircut, and that kind of wakes her up in a way where, you know, she goes back to Albuquerque and she kind of confesses to the real stuff that actually happened with Howard. We get a follow-up to his wife, and she actually goes to the wife's house to be like, this is my testimony. I'm giving it to you. And she kind of comes back vengeful of like, I can sue you for like everything you own and whatever you will own. And you kind of get that, like, why are you doing this? And you can see that it's like because for her, it's the right thing to do. And even though she will have to live with those consequences, she just can't live with that weight anymore. And that phone call with Jimmy, I think, was the thing that like really woke her up. And honestly, this is the episode that needs she needs to be nominated for.
Yeah.
Because she does all this. She owns up to what happened. Them pulling one over on Howard, how that led directly to his death. And she's on the bus ride, like in the airport, going to her terminal, I assume, and just breaks down. And you can tell just in that scene where she's just crying hysterically on this bus, and you see people like uncomfortably looking back at her, and even like I think the woman next to her kind of like reaches out to her.
That's Vince Gilligan's wife, by the way.
Oh shit, that's awesome. You can tell that she's been holding that in ever since Howard's death. And it was so heartbreaking, but also a little uplifting in that moment as well, where that like she doesn't need to hide anymore. She has nothing left on the kind of the table to really claim as her own. She just needs to own up to it and kind of be a good person. And again, I love how that leads into kind of Jimmy's struggle in the last episode. But I want to talk about, we get back to the cancer patient's house, and again, Jimmy can't control himself, or they can get away scot-free, but he's like, you know what? I'm gonna like mosey around in this house, pour myself a little bit of a drink, and you notice like, oh, the guy's like waking up from being drugged, and you're like, oh God. And then you see the cop car pull up behind the cabbie, and you're like, oh, he woke up. He knows someone's there. He's called the cops. And I love this tension where the cabbie's like sweating, and then even like like Jimmy notices it as well, because I think at one point the mark that they made had also fallen back asleep in the middle of like looking at his phone. And they're just building up in their mind of like, oh shit, they found us. And you get to into the car, and they're just like pulled over to eat food.
Yeah,
so good.
About the taco or not, like, it's great.
It's like that classic Breaking Bad suspension where it was like built up to a boiling point, but then they would always have a little bit of like a hee hee ha ha in there.
Yeah. And sorry, go ahead, Raj.
I think that part of it is, I wonder if Gene this is his subconscious way of basically getting himself caught, right? Like after that phone call, after them, Kim just being like, you gotta turn yourself in, and her just immediately using that and hearing her, hearing his rebuttal and realizing like, this is probably something I should do as well. And him immediately going and doing the most dangerous and reckless thing he can possibly do.
Right.
I wonder if there's a little bit of Jimmy inside of him that he knows that he can't do it. He can't bring himself to actually doing it, but he knows that he can do something really reckless and get really close to getting caught, and that could probably do something. Like that to me was really interesting, because there's definitely a correlation with that conversation and him doing the most reckless possible thing.
Yeah, I think definitely subconsciously, but then also at the same time, how much he was willing to do to still get away from it as well. Where when the Mark kind of wakes up and gets out of the bathroom and sits down, he picks up the guy's dead dog's urn, and I thought he was gonna like throw it over the ledge to distract it. I'm like, oh, like why, dude? But then he like slowly is walking down the stairs. I was like, you're gonna knock this dude out with his own dead dog? Like, what the fuck is wrong with you, man? And then he gets lucky where the dude just passes out, and he almost had some Walter White luck in that moment, where it was like, you just how do these wicked men get as lucky as they do? The
cab driver,
Jeff the cab
blowing it.
Yeah,
and
he's
just the funniest thing. And then the fact that he immediately speeds away, turns it, and just crashes into the first parked car, and then you see the cops just like.
Because they don't even know what's actually going on. They're just like,
they're just eating
fucking
lunch.
Asshole who just like rammed into this dude's car.
Did he do that on purpose, or was that an accident? I go back and forth.
I think
he's Yeah.
I think the nerves got to him so much that he was like, I don't know how to drive. And he just wants to get away. Because I don't think he wanted to get, like, he was definitely, I think in that moment he knew it was like, oh God, I'm in over my head. But I don't think he wanted to particularly be caught. So, yeah, he definitely, I think that was the nerves getting to him where he just didn't know how to drive for a good 10 seconds. And then before we get to the end here, following up on the cops picking up Jeff, we get back to divorce court with Saul and Kim, and she leaves. You see her kind of leave the office, and Jimmy's or Saul's first appointment is finally getting called up after signing the papers with Kim, and it's Emilio. Jesse's
looks great, by the way. Looks like he has
did
not
age a day from the first episode of Breaking Bad, where Jesse's partner, who gets caught in the first episode. I think that's the first episode of Breaking Bad, where the same scene where we get introduced to Jesse, who's naked on top of the house a couple doors over, and so somehow has not aged a day. Looked great. I was like, oh my gosh, I love that little bit of callback there, and I thought that's all we were gonna get. But then Kim walks out, pulls out a smoke, something that she used to do with Saul, or with Jimmy, right? Is like having a cigarette after a stressful time of being a lawyer or dealing with stuff like that. And out from the shadows, walks out one Jesse Pinkman, who I think this scene may be a little better done to. Aaron Paul does look great, but he definitely has aged since the times of Breaking Bad, right? So I think like them using a darker like nighttime scene, I think better hid how much he's aged, and I love that. But he also hasn't missed a beat. Where I love that where he asks to bum a cigarette. He's trying to like, because she gives him a cigarette, she's like, he's trying to be polite and like make small talk. How'd y'all feel? Roger, how'd you feel about Jesse Pinkman and Kim Wexler sharing a cigarette?
It's fun. It's fun. Again, that was pure fan service, but I loved it. Like I can't not like it. Like I like seeing these two characters, these two very different characters, fan favorites, interact, and also specifically since like they have some similar-ish storylines, like, or at least paths in their life in terms of dealing with somebody who is far worse than them, but also helping them out with every step of the way. It was interesting to see that conversation, and also I think it did do enough to move the story along, at least with showing how Kim feels about Saul, or Saul has become, with just that one last line. That was really good. But holy shit, it was raining so hard. Like that's what I was thinking about the entire time. I was like, oh my god, this is a nightmare. This is like flash flooding we're talking about here. Oh my god,
it looks like a monsoon almost. Like, why is this happening in the middle of Albuquerque? Jake, how did you feel about did you feel like it was a little too fan servicey? How do you think about Jesse and Kim?
I think because it was like just this kind of like big picture conversation of two people just kind of vaguely talking big picture, but something that would ultimately influence one of them. I think is a smart way to do it. Plus, it's like the show has been holding back for so long, where it's like Albuquerque's like, I've been to Albuquerque. It's pretty big, but it's still like you could still run into someone at some point.
Yeah.
And the show has never done that until now. Really. So it did it good.
Yeah, I personally really liked it, and I liked that he recognizes her, and he's like, "You're a lawyer, yeah. You represented my boy Combo," and where he does like I told him not to steal where he's like, the pictures with baby Jesus in front of the church, and like, I don't know like why he did it, but
it's so good too. It's so like classic Jesse, where it's like, shut up, you dirtbag, like stop talking. Oh my god,
like, he can't help himself because he can't sit in silence, and especially because, and again, it's a little thing that I love that they kept in character with him, is honestly just because she gave him a smoke and he feels like he needs to like interact with her in some way, and he asks her the honest question of like, yo, is he kind of all he's built up to be? Because my boy Emilio is like looking at like hard time, not just like stealing some property, but some real stuff. Like, is this guy any good? Because he's convinced he's great because he watched a funny commercial, but just because it's a funny commercial doesn't mean anything. Like a surgeon could have a funny commercial, but that doesn't mean I'm going to trust that surgeon to kind of operate on me. And I love that even like a very young Jesse was able to kind of cut through Saul's bullshit a little bit and kind of recognize that. I loved that, to have him talk about that with Kim a little bit, where Kim knows the full picture of Saul and his bullshit and his facade that he puts up to kind of sell himself to others and scheme over others. And she just says, like, when I knew him, he was, and she flicks her cigarette out into the crazy weather and walks away. And I going back to not just these two characters who were kind of the number twos to the main characters of these shows getting to have a moment with each other, but also from a production standpoint, right? Like Jesse Pinkman was supposed to die in the first season of Breaking Bad, and then they were like, oh, well, Aaron Paul has this great chemistry with Walter, and he's bringing so much more to the character than we can imagine. Like, he's got to stick around. And I was reading something similar with Kim. Like, she wasn't planned to being killed off, but when they introduced her and like they were kind of writing about her in the first season, they had no idea where they wanted to take her. And I thought it was interesting that even on that end, these two characters who were big question marks for the creators at the very beginning, who I would argue are kind of the strong, like one of the strongest things of their respective shows, kind of coming together for that, and being kind of highlights together. I absolutely loved that.
It's a good way to look at that. Yeah, the two that endured.
Yeah,
basically.
Exactly. The two that also like got away a little bit, and you already see Jesse kind of like moving on and being able to live with it, and like now in these last couple episodes we get to see Kim's side of that, of how to move on and how to walk away from all of this crazy bullshit, right? And so we get back to the the cabbie being in jail, Gene, Jimmy, Saul, whoever it is at this point, being like, oh, like, I'm pretending to be your dad on the phone, and I'll talk to your mom, and she'll be sad. And again, I love fans I knew were able to call it out pretty early on when they introduced Marion, and when Marion was when Jeff bought her a laptop, people were like, she's going to find out who Saul is. She's going to be the one who finds out. And I love the scene of kind of him being called out by her of, you're Saul Goodman, and where she's calling the life alert, and she's like, call the police, there's a criminal in here, he's threatening me, and his name is Saul Goodman. Jake, what did you feel about this? Because I felt like this was also another moment of like reawakening a little bit on Jimmy's end.
It felt like the kickoff to like the end, like whatever is gonna happen. It was just like hype as hell. First of all, she found him on Ask Jeeves, which is tight. Shout out to old Marion. Then like you get the like. I didn't even know
you have to imagine this is like 2010-ish, right? And so like I was surprised to learn that Ask Jeeves was still around in 2010.
Yeah, it was around for a lot. You know what? It might actually still be around. I'm curious.
It's ask.com now.
It's ask.com. Oh, rest in peace, Jeeves.
They got rid of Jeeves, the most important.
They got rid of Jeeves.
So
it was like a really good build. That classic Breaking Bad, like tension erupting. The imagery of the commercial on his glasses, very tight, and then him running away. It felt like the end of The Dark Knight, where it's like all the police are chasing him and he's just like firing off. Like it was like, let's go. Like
he's not the lawyer we need. He's not the lawyer. He's the lawyer we deserve, but not the one we need right now. Yeah. Roger, how do you feel about Marion kind of catching Saul in the middle of the act here?
Yeah, I love it because she picked up on something just because he just thought he had it in the bag, right? He thought he played everybody, and the fact that he accidentally slips that he knows Albuquerque law. He's like, oh, it's different. He's like, bond laws are different here. It's not like Albuquerque. It's like, that's weird. And her catching on to it. And it's just perfect. Like the way that he he manipulated so many elderly people in the past. The
I
way that
know.
he has ruined their lives. He has just manipulated them to doing what he needs, and an elderly woman takes him down essentially. Like, it's incredible. And also, I understand he wasn't gonna kill her, but the fact that he wrapped it around his hands,
the way that
like,
he's
you felt
menacing,
that.
that's a good fucking call out right there of the poetry, as one George Lucas would call it, right? Of how when he found his kind of practice where the last time he was being a good legit lawyer, he was helping out elderly people, and then that even slowly turned into playing around with social circles to get money essentially, and how that was kind of his first big slip into becoming Saul Goodman, essentially, or maybe not first, but kind of the last slip into being Saul Goodman. The last thing he was doing before he had to take a break from being a lawyer was helping elderly people. And then when he comes back as a lawyer, he's now Saul. Jimmy was no longer there, and that was the last thing he did. And for it to be an older woman who kind of gets him, I love that. I didn't put that
poetry,
together.
It rhymes.
Yeah, exactly. It rhymes.
It's like he had manipulated so many elderly people, but he never squared off against Carol Burnett. So
exactly. And
worked.
if you're gonna get Carol Burnett, she's not just someone that you talk about Nippy the dog with for a couple minutes. She's gonna be in there to do some shit, and I love that.
I didn't realize how robust of a service Life Alert was. You know what I mean? I thought it was just pressing the button, but the fact that it sounded like an intercom and it was just
you're thinking of Life Alert I think probably in the early 2000s, maybe late 90s, where it's it is literally, I don't know if they had that intercom system, but again, we're now in the high tech of the 2010s here, where they were able to adapt and get intercom
on it.
systems.
This is the great ads for Cinnabon and Life Alert, for real.
Two things that we thought were dying. They are not.
And the last thing I have here for this episode is when she looked him up, she types con man in Albuquerque, and he popped up as big as day as Saul
Got
Goodman.
that SEO on lock.
Exactly, and I loved that, and her being called out, and you see a tiny bit of the soul he he's being very menacing, but you see a little bit of the soul he has left, where he pauses when she says, "I trusted you. I trusted you as a person," and you see that doubt, and he lets her call, and he's like, "Oh shit! I've let myself kind of go down this hole, and maybe this is kind of the end," because like you pointed out, Roger, he once helped elderly people, and look at him now and what he's doing and how desperate he is.
And he lets go. He lets go of the Life Alert thing. He lets her do it. And again, that goes back to is there a part of him that wants to just get caught? He knows that he's gone too far a little bit deep down, and we see that a little bit.
Again,
it's also indicative of he's very different than any of the criminals in this whole universe that Gilligan and Gould built, where he doesn't ever harm anyone. He never. That was the closest he's come, but he still didn't. Where Walt would just kill someone.
Yeah. If that was Walt, that would have been a different scenario there.
That's what makes him more interesting, because you can still kind of as much as Saul is a larger than life guy, you can still relate to him a little more than a Walter White, because Walter White is just Darth Vader.
Yeah, exactly. There's a little bit more actual gray in Saul than there was in Walter. A little push and pull there. But now we get to the finale here. We're here. Last night's episode, Saul Gone, directed by one Peter Gould. How do you feel, Roger, after last night's episode? Everything that went down. Where do you want to start in this episode?
I guess we could talk about the framing of the time machine. I thought that was great. That's a perfect way to bring together all of the little fan servicey moments you want, right? You can bring in Mike, you can bring back Chuck, you can bring back Walter. But it does frame the episode in a really great way, talking about regrets, right? Talking about what you would have done differently to end up in a certain place, and how some people, even when they're in the baddest of places, can't look back and realize that, hey, I could have done something differently to change this. They're just so deep in it. And I thought that was a really great framing of it. And it didn't feel, nothing of it felt too fan servicey at all. It felt right for the story they were telling in this episode.
Yeah, I love that as well. Jake, how did you feel about the kind of first one where they it goes back to Mike and Jimmy in the desert with Lalo's money, and kind of Mike kind of looking back, and because I think in that cold open, right, he comes up Jimmy kind of throws out the time machine thing, and you don't really know exactly immediately that he's directly talking about regrets, but he's just like, if you want to escape these guys, where do you go? Like, you're a history buff, like he's thinking of it as like in a fun, let's escape and do something, and it's in that scene where Mike makes it about regrets. How did you feel about that, Jake?
Yeah, it was unexpected. I didn't expect us to jump towards that of anything. But then it was another little sweet bullet point on Mike's life and Mike's regrets and everything that happened with Mike that, like, the show hadn't touched upon too much in the later seasons. Spent a lot of time in the earlier seasons with it, so it was nice to get a little extra sweet bullet point on that and really taste his regret. And then, once again, it kind of just identified Jimmy as like just like a weirdo scam guy who's kind of really only thinking about like the money and like stuff,
Yeah, exactly. Where he's like talking about like, I would take all the money we have, invested into what was the company?
Berkshire, right?
Yeah, Berkshire Hathaway. He wanted to do like a Biff thing. He wanted to get like the sports almanac.
Yeah, and come back as a trillionaire. Whereas Mike calls out December 8th, 2001, which I assume is maybe the day that his son was killed. It was maybe the first date that he called out.
Yes.
But then he goes, you know what? No, March 17th, 1984, the first time I took a bribe, because Mike's able to recognize that was probably the moment that led him down the path, led his son down that path, and where he's at today, right? He could have had a totally different life if, he had kind of stayed clean in that moment.
And little things about that too, like the fact that he knew the exact day and date.
Yeah.
Is the same as when he knew the same day and date of when his son died. It was like something that was very big and a grave decision that he remembers, and he's regretted for a long time. It wasn't just Jimmy asking him that in the moment and he recalled it. He had that. Yeah. It was right. It was in the RAM. It was in the
And I like that we start with this scene too, because Mike being probably the eldest of the people in the game, right, on this side of villainy with Gus and Walt and all of that stuff, he's had the most time to actually reflect and think about that stuff. And that's a subtle way to set up of like, all right, this is where Jimmy has been, this is where he's at, where he's deflecting, he's running away, he doesn't want to have this conversation, and then we're going to get him to where Mike is, where he can actually start reflecting and looking back and owning up to the regrets he has, right? And, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and I guess to skip forward really quick to the Walt one, which I'm sure we'll talk about, like him and now his regret at that moment is that he didn't land the scheme well enough. Like his regret was that he slipped and he hurt himself. Just like he fucked up this whole situation. Now they have to change their life. Like that's that to me, like very very clever packaging for this entire episode.
Exactly, and I love Walt. It's just kind of like, we're talking about time machine and stay in your lane, and like
he was so good. Great.
Bryan Cranston did not miss a beat, bringing back that super condescending Walter White, where they're I think that's them hiding away in the vacuum cleaner storage, waiting to be transported, which I love, because that's also like probably one of the last significant conversations that they had. And I love that Walt is obsessing about something that does not matter, and Saul is just like, all right, like. I love that you see the juxtapose in this very simple scene between our two protagonists from both shows. And then we get the last one, just to stick with the time machine stuff with Chuck, which I think was probably the moment that, looking back, Jimmy would have changed, and someone picked up, I think this is where he's picking up his groceries for his brother, and Chuck's like, I can get someone from the office to do this. He's like, no, I'm your brother, like I've got it, I paid for it, don't worry, don't reimburse me. And kind of Chuck brings up like, it's not too late to change your path, and maybe in the full context of their relationship, maybe it was Chuck trying to manipulate Jimmy out of being a lawyer again, but there's still this moment where maybe things would have been different if Jimmy had just sat down and talked with his brother about his cases, right? And he even like leaves. And he says, "Hey, maybe next time I'll have your paper." And someone pointed out that in the first episode of Better Call Saul, where he brings Chuck his groceries and stuff, he brought him the paper, and Chuck is like, "Oh, you brought my paper." And so, just to give it a little context, that might be the day or two before the first episode of Better Call Saul. Jake, how'd you feel about the kind of the source of the time machine conversation revealed to be Chuck?
It was nice because it was like, oh, for all of Chuck's faults, and Chuck could be incredibly evil and petty in certain points, like he could have been good for Jimmy, and he wasn't that bad, I guess.
Roger, how about you?
I thought it was great. I didn't expect him to be in this episode at all.
No.
I know. I love that we got his. It kind of hits you where you're like, oh my god, we have not seen Chuck in seasons at this point. It's insane.
Yeah. It was great.
I loved that the kind of subtle hint of that was probably Jimmy's moment where that could have been the change of course for him. And if he had given, there's a lot of manipulation between both of those brothers. And I think maybe the source was Jimmy recognizing that, like, if he had actually just talked to his brother, maybe that all could have been avoided, and they could have greatly changed the relationship. And all of that kind of builds up the rest of this episode, right? Where I love how quickly Saul gets arrested because, he's got helicopters chasing him. And it's in that moment where he's like running towards the tunnel where I was like, oh, Jimmy, you are way in over your head. You're not coming out of here.
So desperate. And it goes back to like what he had been doing with his mall scheme and his identity fraud scheme, where it's just like, he's a desperate, dirty criminal, and he ends up in this dumpster covered in poo-poo with another burner phone that he could barely open, which that was the most tense, anxiety-inducing part. You ever open one of those packages? I was like, oh my God.
I know, and he spills everything, and he's like kind of yelling, and it's like, dude, you're supposed to be quiet right now. And I love how quickly the cops are like, anybody home? And I love the shot of him like with his head peeking out of the trash can. It's so good, and it's such a pathetic way for him to get caught, which I feel like is so in line with who Jimmy is. Even we'll get the scene with Marie later where she's like, I hear they found you in a trash can. Makes sense. Like, I love that they got Marie back of all people, and it makes sense because they're pinning everything on him. I loved that, and
it worked. She really worked, where it was at first you're like, huh? Wow, that's crazy. That's weird. And then as they sit down, you're like, oh, this makes sense. And you're like, oh shit, he's really the last person that they can dump this all on.
Yeah, because
she's one of the only like existing victims.
Yeah, you get a reminder of how big of an explosion everything was in Breaking Bad for sure.
Yeah, and him calling out Bill Oakley, and I just really
love that Bill went. Like I don't know if I would have, even if I was in Bill's shoes, but I love that Bill was like, you know what, maybe I can make a name for myself.
And that's what I love about this, is that at the end of the day, he just brought Bill Oakley just to show him what the fuck was up. You know what I mean? Just to show him that he's still better. Like, you can take all my ad spaces, but like, I'm still the king here. Like, I'm lead counsel essentially here. Like, your advisor.
I love that we get Marie in black and white. Someone else had pointed out on the internet that this might be the first scene with Marie where there isn't the color purple. And so, but I think, again, kind of in her context, it's like, this is also the life that she's living. That's feels very colorless, very hollow, being reminded of who she's lost. And she does the beautiful kind of eulogy for Hank and Steve Gomez in that moment, and it broke my heart a little bit, where like I was kind of hyped for Saul because this episode came back to what the show was great at, and it was showcasing how good Saul is at bullshitting his way through being a kind of great lawyer. But I was also, I hurt for her a little bit because she walks away where, she's like, you're not making a deal with him. He needs to someone needs to pay for all of this bullshit that went down. And I love his fucking sob story that starts in truth, right? Where he's like, this is my story of how I met Walter White. And then he continues on and twists it into I was scared for my life. And, that he even points out the 2 minutes episode where he's like, they killed 9 people across the 3 different prisons. And one of them was a lawyer who, I worked with and all of this stuff. And
that was that unknown to the police? Like, I know they knew that people were murdered, but they didn't know that those were connected.
That might have been him revealing that was connected.
Yeah.
I like to.
I love that moment of just him. Of you see him confess. You think it's going this way, and then you're like, oh fuck, we're doing a scheme. We're doing the Walter White sending the message to Hank, of being like, I was a victim of Hank. I was doing, like, it's essentially his version of that, and him looking her dead in the fucking eyes and saying that, like, it's heartbreaking.
And then with it completely ending on the other side of the table with not what you expected, with them just being like, you really think the jury's gonna go for that? And he's like, hey,
I just need one.
one.
And again, it like encompasses like his kind of addiction to just being like, if I have a little bit of a chance, even if all odds are against me, I'm gonna take it just so I can come out on top, even if there's a little possibility there. And they go with it, and he argues from life plus, I think, 190 years, life plus 190, down to 7 years. And he, that's what he argues down to with this, like, plea deal that they make.
Ice cream.
Yeah, wanting to be in a specific, like a really nice
Bernie Madoff's prison.
Yeah, like he wants to be in a resorty kind of prison, and he wants to be served ice cream every Friday. And they're like, all right, we're giving you the prison, but like fuck off with this ice cream. And I love, this is the kind of pivotal moment for him where he's like, well, I've got information about Howard Hamlin's true death and how that came about, and they all fucking laugh at him, and they're like, you don't talk to your ex, huh? And I loved that, because in a moment it felt like, oh, someone kind of, Kim pulled one over on him in a little bit, in a way, and pulled the rug out from under him. And, how, like, he just wanted this last thing of ice cream, but kind of pushing the needle even further, he gets that kind of shockwave of, oh, Kim confessed. And I think that was, to me, that was the moment where he was like, oh, if she did this, then I should do it, because he was kind of calling her a hypocrite in their last conversation together. Roger, how'd that scene read out to you?
It was really interesting, because then you see that moment in his eyes of like, maybe I'm stronger than I'm giving myself credit here. Like, maybe if she can do this, like they're so, and that's what I love about this finale. They really hammered home that this is, at the end of the day, it's a love story, right? Like it is 2 people that are so connected, and when he hears that, just that the fact that she had that courage to do that, and he just immediately starts thinking about it, like, I think this is something that I need to do. That for me really hit home the entire series and its themes. And I want to say, I guessed it. I wrote it down on that little piece of paper. I wrote it down. I thought I knew that he was gonna do it. I felt it. I just want to put that out there.
Nice. I didn't know where it was gonna go, but I definitely, like, with what you said, 100%, man. Like, I think this is like one of the greatest, like, modern love stories ever told, thanks to just the nuance and subtlety to a lot of it, and the realness to it, where, like, sometimes entire moves can be made with just the 2 characters looking at each other. Right. And what that realization that she did that, and then him kind of being like, oh, well, it kind of goes back to what I've always liked about this show, where the Jimmy and Kim thing is very much like for me personally, like, my wife is like a career woman. She's so awesome, and I strive to catch up to her. I'm like, she's awesome, she's always got it figured out, and like, you almost get like a little bit of a complex, and like, so it's very relatable, like, when it's you're with somebody that you respect so much despite you being a shithead,
and you want to be better because of like how they lead
exactly bit. You that person is really just for you to better yourself. It really was hammered home here with the last I don't know what 30 minutes of this show where
Yeah.
it was all just the end. It was
Yeah, and I want to shout out Kim being back in Florida, kind of just like waiting around, not sure what she's waiting around for at her office, and then she kind of leaves to go volunteer at a local small like lawyer's office, which I loved.
And that's sorry, I think it's so interesting to me because when she went and she confessed, I thought that was gonna be the moment where she starts having opinions, right? Like she comes back and she starts saying, but she doesn't. Like she is still hollow, and then she has that moment where she's like, "Huh, I need to go back, and I need to actually start going back into the law in some respect." And
that blew me away.
That was really fun. Yeah.
I didn't know where that was going. I was like, she's in this office, and then she's like, I'd like to volunteer, and I like, I was like, oh, it's perfect. It's so good for you.
Yeah, I loved kind of like her kind of starting from the bottom again, but helping people nonetheless, where you see that throughout the show where, you know, she's reminded of even in that office, right, where the lawyer's like, you know, lock your doors, call the police, then you're gonna call me, and it brings her back to, you know, how she helped people who were down on their luck, and you know, even if it's just volunteer work, like that's I loved that, of like that's enough for her. She doesn't need any more than that, whereas Saul needs the world, right? And then we get kind of the final sequence here of Saul being walked into the courtroom in his gaudy Saul Goodman suit, which I loved. We get it one more time. He enters the courtroom as Saul Goodman, and he leaves as Jimmy McGill. Roger, how did you feel about this entire sequence of him kind of owning up to everything in this huge pivotal moment?
It was fantastic because, of course, it just mirrors the different ways that Kim and Jimmy are similar and different, right? Like Kim did her confession in a very proper and normal way. She went to the district attorney. She wrote her little thing. She talked to to Hamlin's widow, and she dealt with that. Jimmy, of course, has to do it in the biggest, wildest fashion,
in the biggest fuck you way.
Yeah, exactly.
The greatest
in front
showman.
of everybody. Exactly, showtime, and it is the perfect way to end it. And also, God, it really hit hard when he talks about Chuck, and he starts actually owning up for Chuck finally throughout the series. Like, it's something that he's been burying, and to have it all bubble up, and also, like, that connection between him and Kim, and even after he said half the things, he turns around and he looks at her, and she isn't buying some of it because he didn't talk about Howard Hamlin yet.
Yeah.
And then he immediately goes into that, and he's trying to kind of own up to everything, not to anybody else, not even to Marie or anything. It's just her. It's just her, and even the framing of it looking almost like a target, like that she's the only person that he is talking to in that entire scene, and it's beautiful.
Yeah, I love the moment of him owning up to the Howard situation, but then also going into Chuck, finally processing what he did there and owning up to that. And I love where he walks back to Bill, and Bill's like, that doesn't relate to anything. Like, that wasn't even a crime. And Jimmy goes like, yes, it was. And, you know, the in that moment as well, the judge refers to him as Mr. Goodman. He's like, no, I'm McGill, and sits down. And that's where you're like, oh, he's back. He finally has his soul again. He's no longer this fucking depraved monster that we've seen throughout Breaking Bad, and a little bit that we've seen in these last few episodes. Like, Jimmy McGill is back, and I loved even when he talks about Chuck. We get the shot of the exit sign and the buzzing as well.
I love that. That made me like tear up a little bit.
Yeah, because that's the last time I think we saw, and maybe one of the very few times we ever saw Chuck in a courtroom was in that similar framework. And yeah, I love in the middle of it as well, where he looks back at Kim. She's kind of giving him nothing, and he's like, I haven't done it. Like, I'm here to apologize to you for all of the shit that I've done, and if you're not being sold, I got to keep going. Yeah, this is where, after this scene, we get the flashback of Chuck, and I love that this is where we get that scene after, like, him talking about Chuck and, you know, feeling responsible for his brother's death and owning up to that, and kind of finally being able to grow after this and try to become a better person. And so we get this moment with Chuck, and then we get the bus ride to the prison, where I thought they were about to break out in song and dance for a second there, where they start chanting "Better Call Saul." How do you feel about this, Raj?
I just gotta say, like, this is the most this is the most brilliant way to do this, because he is in a prison of his own making, figuratively and literally. He can never escape Saul now. And the fact that every single person at this prison will always call him Saul, no matter if he is Jimmy McGill on the inside, is the best way for him to kind of own up and have to live and be in imprisonment that he could possibly have, right?
Yeah.
Like he has to look at all these people, and he is reminded of the horrible person he was at all times.
Yeah.
And I think that, I don't know how divisive the chanting will be online. I don't know
I
if
think
it
it'll
is,
be a
but
little divisive of the chanting.
I thought it was great. I thought it was fun.
I personally, that was the one moment where I was like, I don't know if I need this, but I did love the moment building up to it where everybody recognizes him, and I was like,
Yeah.
right, like he probably defended some of these guys as friends. Maybe one of these guys, like he did help at one point, and like he's just always going to be known. And I think in the first episode that we reviewed earlier this season, I think one of the guesses one of us threw out there is like he's gonna get put in prison, and he's gonna be like slipping Jimmy in prison. He's gonna make friends and stuff because everybody knows him and loves him, and he is kind of like a nice like face to face dude. He is charming in his own way, and I love that we get that in that follow up as well, where he's making the bread and people are like fist bumping him and stuff like that.
Hey Saul, what's up? Yeah. There's really a lot. What I liked about this whole last sequence is there were so many parts where, did you guys feel like it could have just ended right there?
Yeah.
It
Yeah,
could have
where
ended
he
right
smiles.
after the court.
Yeah.
It could have ended right after the court. It could have ended. It could
The
have
Chuck
panned out
scene.
while they're all cheering on the bus.
Yeah.
And then there he is, trapped in something of his own create. Like, there's so many points where it could have cut off and it kept going, but in like a great way.
Yeah, because then we get the final scene where Saul's or Jimmy's lawyer is come, and he kind of has a pause, and you're like, huh. And in that moment, it's like, oh, Kim's there. And
Yeah.
I love where he's like, how did you find me? She's like, apparently my bar license like never expires, so I was able to find which prison. And in that moment, I was like, is that how it works? I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know how that works, but okay, I'll buy it for the sake of the emotional part of this scene, right? And they have one last cigarette together, and it's the same way we were introduced to Kim Wexler as we say goodbye to her, of them smoking a cigarette with the kind of like mirrored angle of light that they have in the first episode that she's introduced in the first episode of Better Call Saul. And I love
is in color, which is great. The fire.
yeah, the cigarette where there's a little bit of light left between them, where they get to share this moment of she understands that he's Jimmy again, that he isn't this monster anymore, that loves bragging about controlling or building up this meth empire and stuff, that he's Jimmy McGill again, and that he's actually probably gonna repent for his sins and all this stuff. And they share a cigarette, and all they have to talk about really is the good lawyering he did, where she's like, you went from life in 190 years down to 7, and now you have 86. And and it just felt like a classic moment, and that's all I needed personally, of them just talking about, being good lawyers. How'd that work for you, Jake?
It also is like this is like a weird tangent, but it's also like the sexiest scene between them, I think.
Yes.
It felt like film noir sexy too. It was really interesting.
Noir as hell, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, it's so exciting too, because it's like she shows up again and she's like hot again, like where she's like she's lawyered up. She's dressed to the nines. She's got her bag.
She's still got the brown hair, but she's not doing like the plain looking hair. Yeah.
But it's like, oh, there she is. And then, Jimmy with no mustache, like kind of like he did Mr. Nobody. So he's like a little jackass. So he looks good. But it's also just with the context of their whole thing, where it's like the first time we saw them with that light splayed behind them and then sharing a cigarette, they were more colleagues with like a little bit of weird tension. And, it was the beginning of the show. And now it's everything behind them, and it's always been a really compelling and interesting relationship without ever really. I remember like they kissed, and I was like, whoa, that's weird, in like a few episodes back, and I was like, oh wow, yeah, you don't usually see that.
Yeah, this
to me was like the most like sexually charged relationship, just because it was like from like you said, like the noir motif to the chemistry between them, even with the finality of it all, like it just really, really worked in a kind of off-kilter way for me.
Yeah, I agree with it. And I also really love that scene because it hit home, which I never really thought about, how a cigarette is a motif throughout. I know that they share the cigarette, but like thinking about, the fact that almost like her visiting Jimmy is like having one cigarette instead of a pack. right? Like she can't be with him anymore. Like in person, they can't scheme all the time anymore. Like she can only visit him maybe a few times a year at most. Like that's probably the amount that they'll ever see each other, and it's controlled. Like their relationship, they can have this moment of like of reminiscing or talking or whatever, but then after that, they're separate. Like they have to live their individual lives.
It's a little scratch of the addiction every once in a while.
Exactly. Yeah.
I love the shot while she's leaving the prison of the wide shot of them being separated by the gates, and how his actions.
That really worked.
Yeah,
it really worked.
You see him of like he's behind this, but she's able to walk away, and that's represented by probably because him owning up to the Howard Hamlin stuff and Chuck stuff probably helped her a little bit, maybe not getting sued by Howard's wife. That's probably one thread that it's like the one thread that I recognize that didn't get fully wrapped up, but it was implied enough.
That and Jeff was for me. That for me, like the whole Jeff and Marion thing, it just kind of ended, and it left me a little bit like I was kind of surprised that he didn't even say anything about it in his like big like this is all the things I've done, like right. Even like bringing up like I even brought this innocent kid and his friend into this for no reason, like you know what I mean? Like it just kind of felt like it was dropped and he's just in the cell, and like I understand he probably gets off, probably because he's working with Saul and he's a manipulator, but like I think that we spent like so many episodes with these characters now, and we spent like two to three, right, with Jeff and his buddy. Like I would have liked at least a little bit of like a confirmation as what happened. They're
the new heel. We'll never know. We won't know until the Flynn sequel series you were talking about.
It's interesting that you did say that though, because we did instead get a scene of him calling Cinnabon and like working things out.
I love
which
that.
Gave me just that little. It's why we've always kind of like still liked Saul and related to him, even though he does these despicable things, is that he's still sometimes nice and personable.
You're gonna need a new manager. I love that. Like so good. Like on like his front facing side, he did care about his employees. Like you saw that a little bit in the moments where we saw Gene throughout the years in the show. And I understand the kind of Jeff thread, but I saw it a little bit of like they're just kind of another means to an end. But at the same time, with Jimmy kind of fully repenting and stuff, you think he would had some more reflection on his last scheme with this kind of not close knit family, but this cabbie and his mom and his friend and all that stuff. So but I think for me personally, going back to the Kim thing, I think it was implied enough that maybe what he had done in the court had maybe helped her out enough to maybe back off Howard's wife. So I love that.
Their use of visuals with the gap between them. The show has always been so good with visual imagery and like just that's like the most basic imagery of all, showing the gap between two people. And it like I was like, ooh. Oh man, like I never really like you watch things and people go to jail and you're like, oh okay, he's in jail now. This like sold that. This actually like you actually felt it.
And then she walks away, much like she walked away from Jimmy / Saul Goodman in episode 9, Fun and Games, but this time she gets to walk away from her actual partner in crime, Jimmy McGill, who's finally back. And the last shot is kind of her rounding the corner looking at him. And it's, in my head, Roger, you're kind of, he does the pew-pew, which they've done back and forth to each other a couple times. And in my head, Roger, you kind of talked about like her maybe being able to see him a couple of times a year at most, maybe. In my head, this is her and our last time seeing Jimmy McGill. I think that was their last cigarette together, especially with the one cigarette kind of being lit, that even though everything's kind of black and white, everything's a little colorless now that everything's exploded after the events of Breaking Bad and their relationship. There's this one little moment that they get to share. And to me, I thought that was kind of, at least in my head canon, that's what I like, is that was her last time visiting.
Wow, I can't believe it. I can't believe we're here, everybody.
I know.
I was just thinking about how fast they pumped up Better Call Saul after Breaking Bad. Like we really
it was 2 years.
Yeah, exactly. We haven't had to wait like in between the Breaking Bad to Better Call Saul. It's been consistent ever since, and now we're done. It's sad, but I'm happy we
are done. It is sad, but of course, we're at the end. There's been the big question since the beginning of the show that I want us to answer very quickly, because we got to wrap up here in just a couple minutes. Breaking Bad or Better Call Saul, which is the better show? Jake Baldino, you hinted at your opinion earlier. What is it for you?
Yeah, I kind of blew my shot at the start. Yeah, I definitely like Saul better because it made me realize, like, I'm the type of guy where I like fun, crazy stuff. I like explosions. I'm a huge fan of things that are dumb and weird. And Better Call Saul made me realize that I also really appreciate the smaller stuff. Incredible writing, great character building, slow burns. And I'm like grateful for the show for that. Like, it really kind of like reawakened, like, oh yeah, you like more than just like watching Speed 2 for the 5th time in a month. Like, what's the matter with you? Like, there's so much great stuff out there. And I think that I also love this show because, like, I feel like it's going to inspire people. I know Breaking Bad definitely did, but I think this can inspire people to seek out more drama, more character-driven stuff.
That isn't always bombastic and crazy like Breaking Bad. Yeah, for sure. Roger, it's now on you. Breaking Bad or Better Call Saul?
I've been rewatching Breaking Bad with my girlfriend who's never seen it before. And while I do love that show, there is a lot of that show that feels like they felt they needed to do a big bombastic moment, and it doesn't really feel, it doesn't serve the characters necessarily sometimes. I think that Better Call Saul at its core knew that they were at a disadvantage. So what they had to do was just focus on making amazing and incredible characters and fully fleshing them out. And that's why, for me, I think Better Call Saul is better. Not much better. I wouldn't say it's like it's like this is leagues better, but it is. Right. I think it is the show. Yeah, exactly. And especially since they were so, they this show shouldn't have worked. It shouldn't have worked. And the fact that they did this, I think that it's recency bias, but I think it's better.
I think it starts, when in the first season when you get Tuco and you're like, oh, this is just going to be a greatest hits of Breaking Bad, reintroducing these characters. But then again, what I talked about at the beginning of this episode of like how much more this show became and how impressive that is. I think I still lean towards Breaking Bad, and I think that's just personally of just like the relationship between Walt and Jesse. Like, I think just that I don't think can be defeated in my mind of just like personal preference in Breaking Bad, but I still love the Jimmy and Kim relationship here. I do think on a like almost like a writing standpoint, I think this is the better and stronger show. And like I said earlier, I think that's just because they've been honing their craft for the last 14 years. So even though I think I personally prefer Breaking Bad just because of, how long it's been around and how much that show meant to me watching through it in its original run, I think I would have to concede to you, you two gentlemen, and agree that Better Call Saul is the better show. Ladies, gentlemen, everybody who's
I love you guys.
I love you too,
sorry.
Jake.
Sorry.
It's been so fun to do content with you once every 5 weeks, awkwardly. Every once in a while, we need to have you on some more some more of our shows. Jake, where can the people find you?
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Jake Baldino, my YouTube channel, Jake Baldino, game ranks during the day, and like you so graciously mentioned at the start, the Friends Per Second podcast, my newest thing.
Hell yeah. Roger, people can find you at Rod's Former. They can find you around all of the kind of funny content alongside me at Sad Boy Barrett. Hit us up in the comments below how you felt about the season 6 part 2 of Better Call Saul, the finale, all of the ins and outs. Hit us up on Twitter as well if you want the conversation to continue more and break down more stuff with us. We got to get out of here. Thank you so much for watching this special long episode of the Kind of Funny Screencast.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Jake, again for joining us, and thank you, listener, viewer out there, for joining us. And until next time, it's been our pleasure to serve you.